John Boyd is, well, of course, since it's the late John Boyd, he was an Air Force fighter pilot who first developed the standard method for comparing performance of air-to-air fighters, but then later went on to develop a generalized approach to strategy, which has proven to be extremely useful. The Marine Corps uses it as the foundation for their doctrine of naval warfare, and it's been successfully applied now, not only in my book on business, but by several other people that are writing in the field. John used to say that if his work is going to become dogma, if it's going to stop you from thinking, then right now, run out and burn it. But John's approach matters in the modern world because it's all about understanding what's going on in a changing world and being able to come up with methods to both respond to it and to some extent to shape it like you want it to be. And in particularly, it's how to break out of ideology and dogma and other things that straitjacket our ways of thinking. And it's how to do that and get groups of people to do it and to take the initiative, perhaps even more important, to go out and solve and find and solve problems on their own. And Boyd is probably the best known of the modern strategists who made that the essential element of his school, to stoke up creativity and initiative throughout the organization and harmonize it to accomplish the purpose of that organization. Boyd-type organizations are a lot of fun to work in, and they're extremely fun to watch. There's just excitement, there's magic. Everybody is, instead of just following orders, they take great pride in being able to come up with new ways and new things to accomplish the overall purpose of the organization. He derived his methods from the military, of course, being a retired fighter pilot. But early on, we noticed that most successful companies had used them years before John Boyd came out. Toyota being the most famous, but companies like Southwest Airlines and Apple, who probably never heard of John Boyd, but have used these same principles intuitively since they were founded. Now we're seeing, now that John's been dead for about 15 years and books have come out on his method, we're seeing companies that are now reading these books and applying them, and they're having the same success. They're going up that same steep curve that Toyota and Apple did. Don is coming up with actual hard techniques, how to actually work within my group to apply these principles and to get my group accomplishing the purpose of the organization. And Don has come up with very specific ways to help people in groups actually apply John's ideas. I hesitate just a little because it isn't about applying a specific set of ideas. It's more about applying a pattern and a way of thinking. From day one, Don trains people to think innovatively, to come up with new ideas and to be creative and use initiative, but all in service of accomplishing the objectives of the organization. John Boyd described it as essentially getting people to take action to accomplish uncommon goals. The idea being that they'll, of course, accomplish their common goals on their own. But uncommon goals, and in the military, of course, particularly things that might get you hurt or killed, is a whole different problem. It can be extremely powerful. If I have the type of leadership that can get people to do the kind of things that they typically do in war, then just a tiny fraction of that ability applied to business should be extremely powerful. And it is. Essentially, the length of time that it took a fighter to go from doing one thing, turning and accelerating or climbing, to doing something else. But Boyd and his colleagues, it wasn't just John, Boyd realized that it's really more of a mental state. A pilot needs to understand that he needs to change from doing one thing to doing another. And even change from doing one thing to doing another. It gets a little complicated, but he was able to simplify it by saying, look, you have in your mind what he called an orientation, which is just basically your model of how the world is working. And things aren't straightforward. Basically, your idea of how the world works kind of bounces around. But for example, if you're a company and your orientation is that if I reduce my price, my sales will go up. You may notice that sometimes you reduce your price and your sales go up a little, and sometimes you reduce it and it goes up a little more. So it bounces around. But it's bouncing around this common idea of if prices go down, sales go up. So that becomes your orientation. Now, agility is going from that to saying, well, you know, if I improve my quality, then I can raise my price and add some cachet to my brand, and it might be possible to not only raise sales but raise profitability, particularly if, as the Japanese did with lean production, I can lower my cost, quite a bit different than price, of course, at the same time. But see, that requires a whole new, orientation. That ability to shift out of the lower price means higher sales over to the better quality means higher profit is what John Boyd called adaptability or agility. Another way to think the difference between adaptability and agility is adaptability with the time scale thrown in. It's how quickly you can move so that if there's an opportunity there, you can actually exploit it while it's still an opportunity. So that's the basic idea, being able to shift out of one pattern of ideas and actions over to another pattern of ideas and action in order to respond to or shape what's going on in the real world. The OODA loop. That's very, very interesting, I think. Early in his career, John described it exactly as he said. You observe, then you orient, then you decide, then you act. But it became clear very on that that's too cumbersome. And in fact, that's not the way people actually work. By remembering what he did as a fighter pilot and observing things like martial artists, it was clear that they were moving much more quickly than that paradigm would allow. Also in that paradigm, if you want to think a little bit more about something before you do it, you have to stop. It drags out the length of time between when you see what's going on in the world and when you can react. In other words, it hurts agility. So he came up with a more sophisticated version of it that actually mirrors how people in conflicts tend to work. And it's focused on keeping that orientation process that we talked about well matched to reality. And of course being able to change it as reality shifts. And then based on, for example, once you shift out of the low prices mean higher sales over to the higher quality means I can raise my prices and improve my profit. Once you do that, then you can start asking how do you actually do it. Now it starts driving new behaviors and new activities. So you do things that you didn't do when the idea was just lower prices. In fact, over there you may do things as companies have done, like for example, get rid of your R&D department because that's a cost. Whereas over here you may focus your R&D in order to adding the cachet to your profit. So in this case now your orientation is driving your actions. So the basic idea behind the OODA loop, as we say, is that your orientation at any given time drives the actions that you do. But you also need to get going this process of creating new actions within your orientation pattern. And that involves a process of thinking about what's going on, doing what he called analysis and synthesis, trying new stuff out, observing the results of that, and coming up with new ideas, which is basically the scientific method applied to the problem of strategy. So that gives you the loop effect in there. Okay, so we want to, we have the orientation of better quality gives us higher profits. How do we come up with ways to increase our quality without raising our costs so that we can improve our profitability? The way you do that is this innovation loop. But the other side of that is, okay, given now that we have what we're going to use, how to use it very quickly. That provides another loop. So the OODA loop is really kind of a generic name for this whole process of sensing a reality, doing actions that are appropriate to it, while also keeping the scientific method, which is really kind of a loop going at the same time. It's very complex in a sense, but with some practice. And again, the kind of stuff Don is doing helps train people into doing this. With some practice, you can make it work. Now here's the key. And it's something that Boyd insisted on. It's complicated and it's hard, but it's hard for your opponents too. And you don't have to be perfect at it. All you got to be is just get better than your opponents. And it's Don's ideas and Don's methods will certainly help you do that.